Hello, welcome to the Politics Chicks podcast. I'm Monica Healy.
And I'm Christy Branham.
Today we are joined by Darci Smith, who is running for Minnesota House of Representatives in District 37A.
Darci is a realtor with Edina Realty, a longtime sales trainer and executive educator, and someone whose commitment to advocacy began long before ever considering running for office. Her campaign is rooted in values that she learned growing up in a blue-collar union family, that good neighbors take care of one another and that government should work for everyday people. Darci, welcome to the Politics Chicks podcast. And I'm so excited because when you're elected, you will be my personal representative in the Minnesota State House.
Yes. Oh my gosh, that will be such an honor. And thank you for having me today. Huge fan of you guys. And I would say too that I am proud to be the third coolest Smith ever to be on this podcast.
I just need to say that every Smith from Minnesota is cool.
Yeah.
Andy Smith, Darci Smith, Tina Smith. If your last name is Smith, you're a good company.
I can't wait to do some content with Andy sometime. We'll get that.
Yes, that would be great. So before we dive into things, you've got the whole Smith connection, but you and I figured out a connection too. We had a text thread going a while back, and I noticed that you have a 605 phone number, and 605 belongs to South Dakota. It's one of the only states in the country where the whole state is covered by the same area code. So we both grew up in Sioux Falls, granted, not just in different centuries, but in different millennia. We graduated from different high schools, but we were also choir geeks. Yeah, and I say that, choir geek.
Yeah, I was in show choir. I was in women's vocal jazz and combined vocal jazz and concert choir, all of them. Yeah, I was a geek.
So we graduated from different high schools, but I student taught at the high school you graduated from, and Al Stanga was a legend in the Sioux Falls music scene. So years ago, when you were sitting in Mr. Stanga's choir class, did you ever imagine that you might be running for office in Minnesota someday?
You know, yes and no. Not because of choir. I mean, Stanga was definitely an icon and a legend in terms of choir teachers. He would have us show up and we had to just pull an A note out of the air every day. That's how he started.
And I bet you can still do it.
I don't know.
Without a key? Like he wouldn't hit A on the piano, you just had to
hit an A on key as a group with probably 100 of us. I mean, we had a huge choir class.
That's brutal.
Yeah. Well, it was really cool. It actually helped us, with our ears and being able to listen to the phone. And it was a really cool exercise. But I actually had a government teacher at Roosevelt that invested a lot of time in me my senior year. I went through some hardship. My mom had gotten breast cancer. My grandfather, who I worshipped, had also passed away from cancer that year. And this government teacher really invested in me and got me excited about government, which is why I eventually ended up majoring in poli-sci my first year of college.
Okay, well, there's another little tie-in because, first of all, hooray for teachers. I'm a recently retired music teacher, but I attribute my time as a music teacher to my high school choir and band director. So hooray for teachers who invest in their students and see the potential in them. That's great.
We just had Cedric Frazier on yesterday, and we had a really interesting segment with him talking about the value of investing in young people and how that pays off on the back end. If you put the time and the money and the energy into them in the front end, how much better the outcomes are for all students, regardless of their demographics. And your campaign website tells a story about asking your dad when you were 7 years old why your family was Democratic. So can you tell us that story? Because Monica and I just both found it charming, but also very informative.
Yeah. My dad took a lot of pride in being a good neighbor and taking care of the people around him. Mr. Rogers always says, look for the helpers. And I would say that my dad was one of those people. He was a helper. And I remember sitting in the living room and Bill Clinton was on the TV for some reason. He'd been elected president. And I asked my dad, I said, Dad, why are we Democrats? Why did we vote for Bill Clinton? We, of course, because it's 7I. How to say. But he responded by saying that it's because they stand up for the working class. They stand up for the little guy. And we're the kind of people that stand up for the little guy. If something's wrong, we stand up and stand for what's right. So that is something that has followed me all along. Even, as 18 years old, I was like, I'm going to save the world and create world peace when I'm president. Like, that is what we're going to do. So the world had different plans for 18-year-old Darci, but I at least now get to try and be a helper in 37A in my little corner of Minnesota.
Well, and those values that the Democrats stood for 30 years ago are still true today and never more glaring in the difference between the two parties today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you must have had some connection going further back than even your dad, because your grandfather served on the executive board of the Steelworkers Union, and by and large, that's a Democrat kind of thing to be in the union. So, what did growing up in that family teach you about service?
Was he a 49er? Was that
I'm not sure.
okay?
He passed when I was 17.
Okay.
And I definitely didn't understand all of that stuff until more recently. But
Mhm.
what I do remember, I mean, my grandparents were probably 6 blocks away from us growing up. I grew up in a small town, and I would ride my bike to my grandparents' house every day during the summer because grandma always had ice cream and Totino's pizzas, those horrible pizzas that were addictive as children. And so I would spend a lot of time there, and I spent a lot of time with my grandpa, and he was a big gardener. He actually grew up in a farming family and eventually got a job at a steelworking factory where he managed people. And then as a manager, he started to notice some of the injustices that were happening with his team and started standing up for them with upper management, which caught the attention of the union leaders. And they saw him as someone that should be put into a leadership role. So they put him on that path. And eventually he retired as an executive for the Steelworkers Union. So he traveled a lot between Nebraska and St. Louis. So I'm not sure which like chapter of the Steelworkers Union he was with. I could probably find that out if you really wanted me to. But my my strongest memory politically is that every weekend in the morning, if I went to my grandparents' house, my grandpa was sitting in the living room drinking coffee with 3 or 4 other dudes, and they would be talking about politics and who was running and who they wanted to get behind. I'm sure that they were probably talking about endorsements and things like that. And I just didn't understand it all, but I feel like I was immersed in it as a child. And my grandpa was also the kind of person who would give the shirt off his back to anyone, literally, um, almost to a fault. And that's where I got some of that like people pleasing and advocacy from. But I'm fortunate enough to have been able to evolve, and I'm strong, and I'm going to stand up for what I believe is right while also protecting the little guy.
Well, I mentioned that you're going to be my representative in my little corner of Maple Grove because there are several representatives based on where the location you are in the city. And Maple Grove is, I've lived here now going on 26 years. And my little neighborhood has been such a blessing to me and my family. It's very, for people who are not from this part of the country, Maple Grove is very diverse. We have a large Indian population from India. We have a large Pakistani population. We have Somali population here. We have a large Hispanic community. We have Boston Scientific and Medtronic nearby. So that's why we have a lot of international individuals coming to work here. And so they've embedded themselves in our neighborhoods. And it's been such a blessing because my kids have grown up with that diversity. I can remember we would barbecue in the summer and we'd have to have a grill for people who could eat meat, whatever. We had a lot of Jewish people in our neighborhood. So we had a grill that was like all meat, no dairy. And we had a grill that was vegetarian because we had a lot of Hindus in our neighborhood. Like that's just the way it was. Like we took care of our neighbors. If we were having a barbecue for the neighborhood, like everybody's need was met, right? So do you think politics has lost some of that looking out for your neighbor, that being inclusive, that making sure that your neighbor's needs are met? Because I kind of feel that way a little bit.
I think we all feel that. I think, the word representative seems to have lost its meaning when you get into government. And that's ultimately why I'm running, because I think that the average person, and I say this all the time, like, most important thing for you to know about me is that I'm average. But like the average Minnesotan, I've poured over bills. I've had to decide if it's more important to pay my electrical bill or get groceries for my family on certain weeks. And I think that some of our representatives don't have that in common with the people that they're representing. A lot of them are out of touch and think they know all the answers, but how can anybody know the answers to anything if they haven't walked a day in your shoes or at least asked to hear about what a day in your shoes is like.
Right.
And that is who I am. I'm willing to see the humanity in every single person I come across and try to understand where they're coming from and then problem solve to find a way to make their lives better. That's
I love
what our
that.
job is as representatives.
Christy and I have said for a long time, and in many conversations that we've had with candidates, that the strongest candidates are those that have like real life experience before entering
Yes.
into politics. And you have that. And you have this interesting background where it sounds like you felt like that was where you were pulled, but you've spent nearly 20 years training sales professionals before becoming a realtor. And neither of those jobs exactly screams future legislator. So why now? Like how did you happen on this path after all this time?
Um, I mean, I don't know how woo woo we want to get, but it is something that, like I said, in fourth grade, I had a teacher tell me that I was going to be president someday. And so my entire elementary school class was always President Darcy. And
That's so cool.
and then and then I went into that honors poli sci program in college. And 1 month in, 9/11 happened. And that shook me to my core, shook a lot of people to their core. And being a college student in South Dakota, it kind of changed the way I saw things because I saw a lot of ugliness come out of folks. And I decided to change my path and ended up falling into sales. But the beautiful thing about the skills that I gained when I worked in sales, my job was to connect the vendor, so the brand that I worked for, with the retailer. So the retailer and the brand, as you can imagine, might have different goals on a daily basis, right? They kind of want the same thing. They want sales, but the brand has their way of doing it and the retailer has their way of doing it. My job was to help them figure out how to do it together because if they both win individually, then we all win together. And so that ability of advocacy and mediating and problem solving and negotiating is something that I feel brings a different kind of strength to the table in a world where we are so deadlocked and divided. And we need somebody to build those bridges to get good things done. And I'm happy to work across the aisle. We just got to find the right ideas.
Right. Right. And we've talked to a couple candidates about housing shortages in this country right now and the rising cost of rent, we just, before we came on, we were talking about interest rates, right? So, as a realtor, you have a very unique perspective because you're working with people trying to get into either their first home or a new home or into a townhome or a condo. What are you seeing right now? Because honestly, buying a home is like the biggest decision you'll make financially in your life because it becomes, for most of us, it's our biggest asset, correct? So, what are you seeing with people right now? Are they struggling to find homes and also struggling to find financing too with the interest rates the way that they are?
And before she answers, I'm going to interject because if you're listening to this, you can't see her face. Her eyes got so wide, like, oh my God, yes.
Yeah.
Talk
Yeah.
housing. Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I definitely got into housing to help people. Real estate felt so natural for me as I had met my partner and his 4 kids, and I was in a job that had me traveling a lot. And life said, nope, you need to be home. You need to be home with this family. And so that's why I chose to go into real estate. But I quickly found that it gave me more purpose than I'd ever had in the sense that I have this talent of solving these problems and getting people in touch with the resources that they need to achieve the goals that they have in life. And to your point, Christy, the check you write when you buy a house is the biggest check you ever write for most people. And for most people, it is sometimes their only asset and their biggest asset. And in my opinion, it is the American dream and it is the gateway to building stability for yourself and your family. And if we are in a world, and we are in this world where the first time home buyer is on average almost 40 years old,
Yes.
then we have a problem economically with families and with the upcoming generations that they're not going to have that stability to be able to provide for their families. And then they choose not to have families. And then we can go into the cost of childcare. But it becomes this slippery slope where if we don't solve this problem and get people into that stability of homeownership, we're going to have a crisis. And so I I have found that we have some great programs. We have in Minnesota specifically, we have one of the best programs for down payment assistance in terms of low interest or no interest loans for down payment. There are some that have no payments until you sell the house. And so you just pay for it out of your proceeds. If you stay put long enough, you're going to have that
Wow.
care of it. I would like to expand that perhaps and look into making it a larger amount because the max right now is 18,000. And when you're talking about $400,000 as the average first time home, that doesn't quite get you there. Um, the other piece of it too is that we have some land trust programs. There's actually 14 programs in the state of Minnesota that will allow folks within a certain income range to purchase the house and not the land. The state actually they buy the property and then they split it between the land and the home. And so the homeowner can buy the home as a way to get into home ownership.
Mhm.
And then down the road, they can sell it to someone else that needs it. And then they can take some of that equity and purchase a more traditional home as well. So we have a lot of these programs that just aren't very well known, but also need more support and need more investment. And I think truly that's the way to solve this problem because when people start talking about building inventory, usually what they're talking about is building custom homes on 40-foot lots that cost $2 million. dollars. And
Right.
not solving the housing crisis at all. We need to make homeownership accessible for young people.
And that's what we've seen in our community is these massive expensive homes being built on lots where they have a postage stamp of land and your neighbor sneezes in the $800,000 house next door and you can hear them because your windows are like that far
Yeah.
apart. So, yeah.
Yeah. And that's not helping it. So,
I'm going to ask a question that is sort of unique to me because I'm temporarily in California due to my husband's job assignment. And there are some housing laws here that I wasn't even aware of. They have changed the taxing for property taxes such that incrementally a homeowner's taxes only rise a certain percentage as long as you own the house. And that might be vastly different than what the house is valued at. So once you sell your home, the new buyer then is responsible for the tax levels of the actual value and what they purchased their house. And like I said, this is kind of in the weeds and not necessarily germane to Minnesota, but I'm curious about like your thoughts on that.
yeah. Well, I'm definitely not licensed for real estate in California. So I don't know a ton about what happens there. I do know that they have a mansion tax too. So there's an additional sales tax when there is a transaction involving a home over a certain value that I know feeds into their economy. But in terms of You know, I do hear a lot from some older folks that, once you're on a fixed income and you're retiring and you have this house that you'd like to continue to stay in, but the property taxes are continuing to rise.
Mm-mm.
And, I don't I know that in some other states we have homesteading here where you can get a discounted rate on your property taxes based on your income. But I would not be opposed to exploring ways that we can relieve some of our aging population in terms of homeownership because it's much better to just keep them in their home. And also, I mean, this gets into like the healthcare thing as well. And the costs of, if somebody can live in their home, but they can't afford the property taxes, they might decide to move into, an assisted care facility, which then the costs are totally different. So um I think that it is definitely worth exploring, and I don't think that it's necessarily fair to make the new homeowner foot the bill for the difference either. So,
Yeah.
interesting.
That's why I asked. I think you can see two sides of the argument, and with your experience as a realtor and helping people
Yeah.
get into homes, I figured you'd have some
Well, and
a
especially
unique perspective on that.
for first-time home buyers, like, it's already hard enough for them to come up with their down payment and closing costs. So to have them foot the bill for anything on top of that is just creating another barrier to entry for them.
Right. And and we have another kind of interesting situation going on at Maple Grove that I think is something that we're seeing nationally. There's over across from Lifetime Fitness, right? The community center. There is a two developments of detached townhomes or single family homes that were built to be rentals.
Hmm.
They're not for sale. They're rentals. And so we're seeing this where corporate equity companies are going in and buying all these houses. Like my neighborhood on my street, 3 of the houses on my street now are rentals. They're not purchased. So that is another problem that we're seeing, right? These corporate equity firms coming in and buying up homes by the bulk and then renting them out. So not only are they removing these houses from the market for people who want to actually buy a home, but they're creating the shortage, but they are also, the rent to rent a home is much more expensive in a lot of ways than actually finance and mortgage a home.
Yeah. Well, and you never
So,
see a penny of that back as the renter, right?
right.
Like, even if you bought a home and it depreciated slightly over the course of 10 years, you're still getting some of your money back when you go to sell. Versus when you're renting, 100% of every dollar you pay every single month goes away to the landlord. Um, and I will say nationally, the federal government has passed that law recently that removes the ability for giant corporations to come in and buy up land, but it only applies to corporations that have more than 350 properties. So it doesn't really address the problem, especially not in Minnesota, because I don't
Right.
we have a lot of corporations that own more than 350 properties here. In New York and California, you would, but not so much here. And I think we need to look at that on a state level and maybe make it a little more restrictive because I am a capitalist in terms of I don't fault I'm a realtor for goodness sakes. Like of course I'm a capitalist, but and so I don't fault anyone for wanting to purchase some investment properties and provide some affordable living for folks while holding on to an asset that's going to appreciate and build wealth for your family. No problem. Do you need 300 of those?
Right.
Yeah. Maybe
That's
not.
kind of where I'm coming from because we had actually considered, we're looking at my husband and I are getting older. We're in our, oh my God, we're going into our late 50s.
No.
57, we're going to be 57. So, and you've met me, I'm in a wheelchair. So I live in a 2-story home right now. So it would be beneficial for us to get into a 1-story. So we had thought about keeping our home, letting our kids live here because God knows they can't afford to go live somewhere else. And then once they found, moved out, we would keep this as a rental property. So I also am not opposed to that. I think our house will be paid off in just a few years because we built it and financed it, 26 years ago. Why wouldn't we do that if we have the financial means to? It's extra income for us and it's something that we've earned and paid for. But like you said, it's these companies that are coming in that are buying 100, 200 houses at a time in a community and limiting the availability of homes for consumers to buy. That's
100%.
problematic.
Yeah,
Yeah.
what you're talking about is a retirement plan, and the problem that we have is a hoarding plan. You know, the 300 properties or 200 properties is about hoarding property and hoarding wealth versus you're talking about doing something smart that creates stability and a legacy for your family, not
Yeah.
keeping everything for you.
Yeah.
So, Darcy, are you in Maple Grove?
I actually live in Maple Plain. I am on the southernmost part of this district that stretches from Maple Plain up to Maple Grove. So it includes a lot of those rural spots like Loretto, Greenfield.
Cannot believe it goes out that far. My
Yeah,
husband's in Maple Plain almost every day. Our dear friends live out there. So,
Plain. I love it so
uh,
much.
yeah. So just to give you guys an idea, and are you all that? Do you have all that horse country in between, like
Yeah.
Maple Grove? And it is one of I believe that is one of the most beautiful parts of the metro, is that area between Maple Grove and Maple Plain because there's a lot of horse farms out there. It's beautiful, pristine farmland that hasn't been touched yet.
And there's Baker
Um,
Reserve, which is,
yeah.
and apparently it's around 2,000 acres. I could be wrong. Don't.
I've run Baker's Park so many times. When Monica and I were training for a marathon, we used to train at Baker's Park, and it's beautiful. And it is one of those places where you get past the camping areas and it's like you're immersed in wilderness. I mean, it's absolutely beautiful there. So yeah, I did not realize that you go out that far. It's large. That's a large geographic area.
Yeah. Geographically, it's huge. I would say that, density wise, most of it is in Maple Grove, but the rural sections actually represent about 50% of the population for this district.
Okay.
So for our listeners, Maple Grove is a suburb. It's a first-ring suburb because it's where two interstates meet. But we're talking about a district that goes from suburban to exurban. Would you call that area that? So you've got a lot of doors to knock, a lot of people to talk to. What has been something that has surprised you? What have you enjoyed about campaigning? What would you pass on next time?
Yeah. Um, I would say my favorite part about the doors is truly connecting with people and finding the things that we have in common versus arguing over the things that we don't have in common. I think that when you meet people at the doors, and I was probably not bought into this when I started my campaign, but the more I've hit the doors, the more I've seen that what our leaders talk about when they talk about door knocking is the way to win elections. It is 100% right. I am a full-blown believer. Um, when I talk to folks at the door and they bring up something that maybe I don't agree with or I feel like they're misinformed, I am able to have a more human conversation with them and build trust so that we can have a more productive conversation about how we solve these problems and come to that realization that we actually have more in common than we don't. And we pretty much at the base of it all want the same things. And so it's been really hopeful, I would say. It's actually restored my faith in humanity and restored my hope in our democracy to go talk to people at the doors. So in a way, it's a little selfish for that. Even if I don't win, I know that it's there.
I love
That's
that.
that's really great to hear.
Yeah.
And what are you hearing from the voters? Like what are the issues that they are talking about?
Well, the biggest issue is for sure fraud. That is what
Mm.
everybody is on fire about right now. Is
And everyone should read our 9,800 word article on fraud to get a very comprehensive explanation of what actually went down with the fraud in Minnesota.
absolutely.
I will just put my plug in.
Yeah, I that article, I think I've shared it a couple of times online actually. Um, it helped me gain so much more of an understanding because I definitely felt like I was only getting a part of the picture. And I mean, I understand why people are angry. None of us likes to feel like we've been stolen from, of course,
Right.
you know. Um, and I actually have been spending a lot of time thinking about this, and I think I might have come up with an analogy. I'm pretty proud of it. So, uh,
Tell us.
yeah. Do you know what the safest form of travel is?
Airplanes.
Yeah. Commercial air travel. The reason isn't because there's no accidents, obviously, there's accidents. But when a plane crashes, it triggers an investigation to find the root cause. And the investigations always follow the same exact process. Everyone involved has that common goal, right? They want to find out what happened and make sure it didn't happen again. They're focused on solving the problem, not scapegoating or passing the buck or scoring any.
Uh-huh.
So, with the top concern for constituents being fraud, it should be. I mean, my stepkids have special needs. So, every penny that's stolen from Medicaid affects my family and families like mine. And so, of course, like I understand that instinct to want to find the guilty people and punish them. I get it. But fraud is not exclusive to a single party or a single community. There's always going to be bad actors trying to take advantage. And what's a better use of our time? Like, think like the airplanes. We're going to be better off finding what happened so that we can prevent it in the future rather than pointing fingers at specific culprits that we think might be involved and using that to, gain political points. So I really think it's better for us to find and fix those holes that allowed a system that allowed the fraudsters to succeed. So
Yeah. Monica's
Great analogy.
doing the pointing
On the nose.
You hit the nose. Yes, because, from the research that we did, we actually discovered that all of the back doors that were left open for the fraud were put in place by the Minnesota GOP when they were originally writing legislation as far back as 2016 and perhaps even before that.
I mean, I would tell people to really pay attention to what people are saying on social media because if you really listen to their answers, and I always ask the question: Are they more interested in actually working together to find the solutions, or are they pointing fingers and trying to play the blame game?
Right.
Because if these people were in charge of investigating airplane accidents, would we trust our families to get on airplanes?
No. I think that that is an amazing analogy, and
It's a great analogy.
I'm gonna be stealing that. Sorry. Like,
No,
unless you've copyrighted it already, I'm gonna steal
but
it.
it's like, when, what was his name? Sully? Captain Sully
Yes.
on the Hudson,
Yeah.
yep, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Yeah.
the first instinct wasn't, oh, something went wrong because the captain did something wrong. And by all means, if we had found that Captain Sully had been drinking while driving the plane, we would want him held accountable. But we don't go into it with the assumption that it was all his fault. We look at the data and we look at the facts and we investigate and find out what happened and we fix it.
Exactly. And one of the things that happens in an airplane investigation is they have the black box, right? So they have all of this data that they can access to find out exactly where mechanical malfunctions took place. And unfortunately, when it comes to fraud in Minnesota, we did not have that in place until very, very recently, like 2025 is when they finally passed guardrails to prevent fraud from happening. So and because we're talking about fraud, I'm just going to skip over to something else that's in the national spotlight because you do live in Maple Plain. And so it's clear that the federal government has been targeting Minnesota, correct? I mean, it's the elephant in the room. They're targeting Minnesota. And recently, you lived in one of the municipalities that had a boil water order because of Iranians hacking U.S. infrastructure and interfering with water treatment plants. Now, I want everyone to think about the scale of that because it was I believe it was seven municipalities total that had to have intervention.
30 might have been targeted.
Yeah, I heard 30.
Yeah, most of them, the water supplies actually weren't affected. And it still remains to be seen. There were actually two separate incidents in Maple Plain. And
Mhm.
it sounds like it was more of a technology problem, like something malfunctioned. But then, of course, it seems kind of like a coincidence, right? That a week later now, first we had to boil and then everything was good. And then now we're finding out that Iran potentially is the culprit of hacking these systems. So it's kind of hard not to wonder if they're connected a little bit. I don't like to be a tin hat wearer, but um, or a tinfoil hat wearer, but it is all a little interesting. But I think the thing that's really upsetting about it is I spoke with our mayor and, our local authorities were working with federal authorities on this. Like we're talking three-letter authorities are involved in trying to
Yes.
figure out what happened with this. We're taking it very seriously and it is a national security threat, right? If a foreign adversary can hack into our water supply, water is literally the
Mhm.
root of all life, then that's going to be a problem. And so, and it turns out it sounds like maybe it wasn't even just Minnesota that they were sent
Right.
in other states.
Other states.
Michigan, and a couple other Midwestern states, I think, were hacked.
And so to have the president of our country, who is supposed to be a leader for all of our people, say that it was Minnesota doing it to themselves because they're incompetent is just so disappointing and misleading. And it's leaving our state out to dry and saying that we aren't human enough to deserve a true investigation.
Your campaign has talked about building a high functioning government, and we're clearly not seeing that at the federal level. And,
Right.
and we've even struggled with it on the state level because it's been an evenly split legislature with 67 to 67. So we talked to Andy Smith about this last week, where he's in a very safe blue seat and he's spending a lot of his time campaigning for other people because it's important to have that coalition so that you can actually do something in the government. So let's say you get in. What does high functioning government look like to you on the state level? And what do you want to tackle first?
Yeah. Well, if I get in, it gives us a 68 seat majority in the House. So imagine,
Hopefully more.
hopefully more,
Yes.
right? But if it's just me, and it's not going to be just me, because I think there's a few that are going to do this, uh, having that majority gives us the power to make sure that certain bills are heard. And it gives us the power to push things through committee that we've been trying to push through for a long time and actually bring them to a vote. Things like making childcare affordable, things like making healthcare affordable and accessible, things like putting in more guardrails for fraud. I mean, I hate to say it, but The Republicans didn't, I mean, you know this, I'm preaching to the choir, but they didn't actually pass anything to prevent fraud. And we're very open to improving those systems, and we can actually do it for relative low cost. It's just about being smart. So the things that I'm excited to tackle, I will say, I and I know that there's going to be leadership within the House caucus that are listening to this and going, "Oh, she thinks so, huh?" I plan to march into our leader's office and say we need to hear the ERA first. The state,
Yes.
state ERA needs to be added to our state constitution yesterday.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Who do we want to discriminate against? Come on. Like, this should just be there. And I've heard differing stories about why it didn't get heard this last time around and why we didn't bring it to a vote. But I'm literally ready to like say, look, I got you the majority. Without me, we wouldn't be here. This needs to go up first. And then I also want to fight for affordable childcare is a big one for me. We've talked about education, and I truly believe that a strong education is the root of everything. We know that every dollar we invest in education comes back at least sevenfold to our economy, not to mention what it does in terms of innovation. We could have somebody right now in kindergarten that is ready to cure cancer, right? Maybe they're a senior in high school already and it'll happen next year. But safety, public safety, educated people don't commit crimes because they're able to get good jobs and they're able to have what they need to live a life of dignity. People don't wake up and think, oh, I'd rather commit violent crime than just go work a job that pays all my bills. So, childcare for me, that pre-K, we have a way to do it. We can close some loopholes. We can make sure that people pay taxes when they buy luxury sports suites at Vikings games, and we can offer free childcare.
New Mexico has one of the highest poverty rates in the country, and they have figured out how to offer free childcare.
Yeah. New York City has figured out, and they balanced their budget in a surprise move.
And New Jersey,
So,
New Jersey has it too. And, I was lucky enough as a 5-year-old to have a brother that was 13 years older than me. And he was going to college for mathematics. He's an optical physicist now, smart guy. But he loved his little sister enough that he would come home on the weekends and teach me calculus.
that's
Yeah.
awesome.
Bless my heart, I loved my brother, so I tried to learn it. And I mean, I got pretty good at math, I would say. So my brother would come home on the weekends and teach me calculus. And I don't share that to say that I'm necessarily smarter than anybody else because, ooh, I was able to learn calculus. It's more so that at that age, before the age of 5, our brains are growing and changing and learning so fast.
Yes.
So to have someone invest in that little person's brain and teach it the exercise of learning gave me the gift of making school easy. I got a 32 on my ACTs without studying a day. And I got that full ride scholarship because of it. And obviously, I chose a different path than being an optical physicist. But the gift that he gave me of knowing how to learn is something that it's beyond value.
And I think we owe it to our citizens and our children to put forward reasonable gun legislation. Now, you live in a tricky district because there are a lot of hunters in this area, and hunting is part of Minnesota culture. And there are a lot of legal gun owners in Minnesota who have firearms for hunting or personal protection. And I am 100% in support of the Second Amendment. I think anyone who wants to purchase a firearm who's qualified to purchase a firearm should be able to do so. What we don't need is high capacity magazines. We should have more stringent storage laws. And I personally would love for at least part of Senator Zainab Mohammed's bill to make it through legislation and become law in Minnesota in the next session.
It is such a disappointment that the bill didn't even get to be heard, right?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
with the Speaker of the House who has children that survived a school shooting, and to say that that's what inspired her to get into politics and then refuse to take a stand on it is one of the most disappointing things that we didn't accomplish in the last session. And if we'd had 68, we could have. But yeah, I feel exactly the same way, Christy. I'm a proud gun owner. I grew up, like I said, between Nebraska, South Dakota. I was skeet shooting when I was 12. Like, it is part of our culture. And at the same time, it's common sense to say, be responsible gun owners.
Hmm.
Have safe storage within your home. And that doesn't mean we have to go door to door and check to make sure that everybody is storing their guns safely. It means that if someone gets a hold of a gun illegally, we have a way to hold someone accountable.
Right.
And it just blows my mind that we can't have this common sense legislation. It seems so easy.
Common sense. It's in the name.
You should not have to be conflicted about your position on gun ownership in this country. It's written into the Constitution. We've interviewed Mark Legbold, who is from a really rural part of the state. He is a veteran. He hunts. He should own a gun. But what he said to us during his interview was something is interesting because he actually had someone to tell him that they believe that if they could afford it, they should be able to own a fighter jet. And I was shocked. Monica and I were both shocked when he said that. It's like, what? Who would say such a thing? First of all, because it's just ludicrous, right? But I'm sure.
Agreed.
So
Yeah, humans are the ultimate wild card, and we need to be. I think there's a difference between being controlling and just being smart.
right.
Kristen Bonner, one of my mentors through all of this, who I have so much respect for. She's an incredible public servant. I think she said it best when she started talking about like that guns are still allowed in the Capitol, that we can bring them on the floor of the house, but we
Hmm.
can't bring up until I think it was 4 years ago, we couldn't even bring a baby on the floor of the house. So it's just so nonsensical. And it just doesn't like some of it's like, oh, well, that's not a good idea. Like
Right.
some rando from the middle of rural Minnesota have a fighter jet. That doesn't seem like a good idea.
Yeah, that does not sound like a good idea. And I think that between the fraud and the guns, I think that has really been the 2 points that the GOP has been drilling down on. Democrats are fraudsters and they want to take your guns away. And nothing in either of those cases could be farther from the truth. As you said, you're a gun. I think out of all of the state candidates that we have interviewed, I would say the majority of you were gun owners, to be honest with
We
you.
all grew up in Minnesota, and I, I do know a lot of people that are completely anti-gun, but they're also again reasonable. And if somebody uses it for hunting, they're not looking to take it away from people.
Or personal protection.
Have them in their house.
Yeah.
Right.
Or personal
Yeah.
protection. I think people, if they feel that they need one for personal protection, they should be able to obtain a firearm the right way.
Yep.
So,
Right. They keep them in the hands of people that are responsible with them. That's all.
that won't do harm.
Okay, we've talked about a lot of serious issues, so let's do a little more lighthearted as we kind of wrap things up. So a little lightning round. Okay, this might be a tough one for you. Favorite place in your district?
That is really hard.
Like I said, it was a tough one.
Can I say my back porch? No.
You
Yes.
then.
Absolutely.
My back porch. My boyfriend built me this lovely screened-in back porch. And in the summertime, it's my favorite place to sit and drink a glass of wine in the evenings. And in the wintertime, he encloses it and we turn it into a jingle bar. And
Huh.
it is,
That's fun.
and we live on an acre and there's turkeys back there and I can stare at my garden and we have a pond and with a waterfall. So yeah, that is probably and a close second would be Baker Park Reserve.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah. Safe distance from those turkeys, though, because Minnesota turkeys are mean.
Yeah, I stayed on the porch.
Okay, favorite season. And there's a right or wrong answer with this. Okay, I'm not really. I have my
Uh,
favorite.
Oh man, that's hard. Probably, can I say like that time between summer and fall? Like late summer,
Yeah.
and fall?
I agree.
Like September.
Yeah.
Yeah.
September is great.
When you're just starting to get the nip in the air, but it's not cold enough that the air hurts your face.
Still warm enough that I can take my boat on the water and go for cruises, but it's not so hot that I feel like I have to be in the water all the time.
Yep.
And the leaves are starting to change and you need sweaters in the evening. Yeah, September.
All right. One final question. What would surprise people if they were to learn this one thing about you?
I am descended from pirates.
What?
I love that.
Okay, now I have to say more about that.
My aunt did one of those ancestry things a while back, and we discovered that, I mean, this guy was a really horrible person, but he was a Dutch pirate that went and pillaged places and stole people and sold them into slavery, unfortunately.
My husband's descended from a pirate also. I can't
Yeah.
remember which one, but yeah.
Yeah. But if you know me, people that know me will say that there are two things I'm obsessed with, and it's dogs and water. If I can be on the water, in the water, near the water, I am a lake girl through and through. Like if I can just go put my feet in the lake, I'm a happy camper. Um, and so our running theory is that it's the pirate blood that I just have to be a
Yeah. Our
shark.
Army timbers. And we ask this of all of our guests, what's giving you hope right now?
Oh, again, the doors and meeting with some of these groups that are starting to form as a result of some of the connections that were formed in the early parts of this year through some resistance movements. And I've been in a couple rooms in the last week of movements that have started to organize, and to see the kindness and the cooperation and the passion and the ability to get things done even when they don't all agree on the same things, because it's kind of interesting to see, like, there's like activists, true activists, and then there's people that are just not happy about some of the things that are happening, and to see them all come together and just work for how do we impact change? How do we flip some of these seats like Darci Smith and Jason Heiser and Tracy Brazil so that we can get these good things done? That gives me hope. And they're all really fun people too. So,
I can't tell you how many of the candidates that we have talked to have answered that the door knocking is giving them hope. And I love that because that is you talking to everyday Americans and everyday Minnesotans and hearing from them.
yeah, it is
So
pretty
I love
magical.
that.
Yep.
Where can our listeners learn more about your campaign, to volunteer, get involved?
Yeah. So, smithformnhouse.com is our website. You can also find me on Facebook and Instagram. But Smith for MN House, you can push a button to donate. We need donations. We actually beat my opponent with the first reporting by a hair, which is incredible because he's incredibly privileged. Um, and so we know he's going to step up his game. We need funds. We need.
And we know that this is not there's no incumbent in this race because you're taking Kristen Robbins'
Yep.
seat, correct?
Yes, and that's why this is such a targeted district for the DFL this go around, is because it is the first time in a long time that it's going to be open for us to take no incumbent to run against. So we're really throwing everything we have at it. I think that our team has knocked probably close to 20,000 doors at this point. I'm out knocking every single day. Every time we have to print lit, it costs us $2,500. Um,
Huh.
every time that I have to order 100 more signs. I love it.
I'm holding up. I got Darcy's mailer because I'm at your
Love it. Yeah. I mean, it's $2,500 every time we have to print another round of lit. It's every time I need to order 100 more signs, that's $1,000. So as much as I wish it wasn't part of campaigning, we do need funds. But the good news is that these local campaigns that can make a huge difference, right, by winning a majority in the state house, are relatively cheap to win. The last person
Right.
against Mitch McConnell raised $200 million, and we all knew from the get that she probably didn't stand a chance.
Right.
There are these small little local races, $80,000. I can win this thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
The school board. I talked to somebody that's running for Robbinsdale School Board and asked her what she needs to win, and she said about 6 grand.
Yeah. We're actually interviewing a group of candidates running for the Osseo School Board coming up pretty soon. We're doing them all in one interview. Yeah. Yeah. And so did we miss anything? Is there anything else you would like listeners to and your potential voters to know before we sign off?
Just that I'm one of you. And I truly think that meeting with folks where they are and hearing about their lives is how our government is supposed to be effective. And I would just ask them to remember that when they vote. Who's the person who is going to pick up the phone when you call?
Excellent. Darci, thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate your willingness to step into public service and wish you the best on the campaign. And I got to tell you, when you came up to us and started talking, we met you in an event that was a fundraiser for Kelly Morrison, and you started talking to us, and all of a sudden I'm like, wait, you're going to be my representative. Of course, we want you on the show. So
Thanks for being here.
thank you for being here
For
today.
having me. Super fun. I love you guys.
Love you too.
Right back at you. To our listeners, if you're finding meaning in the stories we're sharing, if something moves you, challenges you, makes you see the world a little differently, please like, comment, and share. It helps more than you know.
And follow us everywhere at The Politics Chicks on Substack, Threads, Blue Sky, Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook.
Thanks for being a part of our community, folks. Keep shining your light so we can find each other in the dark.
And remember, we're stronger together. Darci, thank you so much for being here today. This was a great conversation.
Bye, y'all.